How many days off do you get per year? 20? 15? A medieval peasant, a serf who couldn't even leave his village without permission, probably had more time off than you. According to economist Juliet Schor from MIT, during certain stretches of 14th century England, peasants worked roughly 150 days a year. The rest was Sundays, saints' feasts, harvest celebrations, wedding weeks, half the year, not producing anything. And that's just one piece of a daily life that looks nothing like what you'd expect. A medieval peasant's routine was brutal, dirty, and loud, and weirdly more similar to yours than you'd want to admit. I'm going to walk you through a full day in this person's life, from sunrise to the moment they fell asleep, sharing a room with a cow. And by the end, how the worst catastrophe in European history gave this peasant something centuries of labor never could. A peasant's day started with the sun. In the English summer, that meant around 3 in the morning. No clocks in the village, no fixed hours. When it got bright, you worked. When it got dark, you stopped. First thing after waking, prayer. Not poetic devotion, real fear. You thanked God for surviving the night. No fire on the thatched roof. No wild animal getting in. No disease taking a child in their sleep. That last one happened constantly. About half of all medieval children didn't make it past their first year. Then breakfast. A chunk of hard rye or barley bread. Wheat was a rich man's grain, washed down with small ale, a cloudy, thick drink with maybe 1% alcohol. Almost liquid porridge. Everyone drank it. Men, women, children. It had calories. It tasted better than most well water, and the boiling during brewing made it generally safer. With something in their stomach, the peasant headed to the fields. And here's where the image most people carry falls apart. A peasant didn't own a farm. The Lord owned the land. Peasants got narrow strips scattered across the village's open fields. Your plots could be in 3 or 4 different spots, mixed in with everyone else's. The whole village plowed, sowed, and harvested together. They grew rye, barley, oats, peas, harvested everything by hand with a sickle or scythe, no machinery. Every grain cut, bundled, and threshed by human muscle. And on top of their own strips, peasants owed free labor days to the Lord, called corvée. You'd abandon your own crops to plow the Lord's land for nothing. In some regions, that ate 2 or 3 days a week. You worked another man's soil to earn the right to work yours. But field work wasn't constant. It had a rhythm. Planting in spring, harvest in late summer, near shutdown in winter. The breaks between seasons were far longer than you'd guess. A peasant's diet sounds miserable by ingredients, but the numbers surprise. An adult consumed somewhere between 3,500 and 4,500 calories a day, more than the average American eats now. The difference? The peasant burned nearly all of it. The center of everything was bread, between 2 and 6 pounds per day, dark, heavy, made from rye or barley. Alongside it, pottage, a thick stew of whatever was around, onion, leek, cabbage, turnip, peas. The pot hung over the fire and the family ate from it all day. Meat was rare, usually pork or chicken when it appeared. Eggs and cheese filled the gap, and ale was the everyday drink. Historians debate the exact quantity, but nobody disputes it was everywhere. The church allowed it. Children drank it. Now, picture where this person came home to. One room. The entire family, parents, children, sometimes grandparents, slept, cooked, ate, and lived in that space. Packed earth floor, sometimes covered with straw. Walls of wattle and daub. Woven branches smeared with mud, manure, and straw. No chimney. The fire sat in the center, and smoke escaped through holes in the roof. Dark, smoky, warm, no glass windows. Furniture was almost nothing. A bench, a chest, maybe a table, no chairs, and no pillows. Heads rested on wooden logs. But the detail that really separates their world from yours, about a third of the room was fenced off for the animals. Pigs, chickens, a cow, living inside behind a rough partition, all winter and at least overnight in summer. The animals were the most valuable things a peasant owned. Leaving them outside meant wolves, thieves, or cold. The livestock's body heat actually warmed the room. Filthy, noisy, and it smelled terrible. But it worked. When people say peasant, they picture a man with a scythe, but women worked more. A peasant wife did everything the man did in the field, plus the house, the children, the food, the farmyard animals, the cheese, the butter, and the spinning. Spinning wool alone 8 hours each day. And the children? Childhood as a concept didn't exist. By 7, a child took on real duties. By 12, the shift to adult work was complete. Boys went to the fields or became apprentices. Girls learned from their mother. No school, no recess. Education was labor. And about 20% of women died in childbirth. 1 in 5. No doctor, no trained midwife in most villages. Having children was one of life's biggest risks. Now, remember the number that opened this video? 150 working days. The real story is more complicated than the internet meme. Juliet Schor compiled data from 14th century English manorial records and reached that figure for rural laborers under specific conditions, especially after the Black Death, when labor was scarce. Other historians push the number closer to 250. The truth probably sits between them. But even the conservative count includes a staggering number of mandatory holidays. The word holiday comes from holy day, every Sunday off, dozens of saints' feasts throughout the year, roughly 1 per week, the full week of Easter, days at Pentecost, time at midsummer, the 12 days of Christmas. Weddings meant days of celebration, funerals too, traveling performers passing through. Work stopped. On those days off, peasants didn't sit quietly. Processions, games, dancing, fairs, communal drinking. Children played with wooden swords. Adults played chess, checkers, cards. It was the entire social life of a community that had no other space for it. What Schor argues, and what the meme oversimplifies, is that the modern American worker has significantly fewer free days than this peasant. Not because medieval life was good, but because modern life, in terms of free time, quietly got worse. Everything you've seen so far was life before 1348. That year, something arrived that changed everything. The Black Death eliminated roughly 1.5 million people out of 4 million. In 2 years, entire villages vanished. There was no medicine, no explanation, and the disease came back 6 more times before the century ended. For those who survived, something happened that seems impossible. The worst demographic catastrophe in European history made the peasant's life better. Not slightly, dramatically. Half the population gone meant half the workforce gone. The lords, entirely dependent on peasant labor, suddenly couldn't find enough people. For the first time in centuries, the peasant had bargaining power. Wages climbed. Lords offered better contracts, extra payments in food and clothing. Court records show laborers walking away from deals, demanding more, leaving one estate when another paid better. Serfs fled to cities, and by law, a serf who lived in a town for a year and a day became free. Governments tried to stop it. England's Statute of Laborers of 1351 froze wages at pre-plague levels. Castile condemned those who wandered idle. Siena targeted workers who extorted great sums. None of it worked. Historians call what followed the golden age of the English peasant. Real wages hit levels that wouldn't be matched for 500 years. Not until the 19th century. Food prices dropped. Peasants ate more meat, wore better clothes, accessed things they'd never reached before. And those 150 working days? That's exactly this period. The second half of the 14th century, after the plague, where Schor finds the lowest numbers. When wages were high, peasants simply worked less, not because they were lazy, because they could. It took the death of half a continent for a peasant to say no for the first time. So what did a medieval peasant do all day? Woke before the sun, prayed to survive, ate hard bread with weak ale, plowed land that wasn't theirs, shared a room with a cow, and slept on a log. The wife worked harder. The children had no childhood, and 1 in 5 mothers didn't make it through giving birth. But this same peasant danced at feasts, drank at week-long weddings, played chess with the neighbors, and, in certain periods, rested more days per year than you do. Not because life was easy, because the system, for reasons that had nothing to do with kindness, left room for it. And when the system broke, when plague took half the people holding it up, the peasant didn't break with it. They negotiated. They demanded. They refused. And for a brief window, they lived better than any generation of peasants before or after them for centuries. The question isn't about the Middle Ages. It's about now. If a 14th century serf managed to turn a catastrophe into bargaining power, what's stopping us from rethinking how our own time gets divided? If you enjoyed this story, subscribe. There are plenty more where this came from. See you in the next one.